Welcome to Kiki's Talk Buffet. Let's talk it out.
All right, you're here to get smart, fast, no fluff, just the real core insights. Today, we're cracking open Rich Dad, Poor Dad, well, the whole collection, really, to basically hand you the cheat sheet.
Yeah, the essential.
Exactly. Understanding money, building some actual wealth, maybe even figuring out that early retirement thing.
It's all in there. And, get ready for some serious aha moments, because the contrast between the two dads is, well, it's stark.
Totally stark. We're dissecting these two, fundamentally different ways of looking at finance.
You've got the poor dad, who, by the way, wasn't poor in the usual sense, more like financially traditional.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, he championed that classic path, get good grades, find a secure job, climb the corporate ladder.
Stability,
Yeah.
Predictability, that was the goal.
Then you got the rich dad, and he preached a completely different gospel, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. It was all about
Right.
learn how money really works and then make it your employee, like a tireless one.
That's the core message right there. I don't work for money, money works for me. It's such a mindset shift. It's about taking control, isn't it?
It is. And it wasn't just theory for the author, Robert Kiyosaki. He talks about deciding, at 9 years old, mind you, to learn from the rich dad.
9. That's incredible.
It really highlights how your financial path gets shaped by the choices you make, sometimes really early on.
It's like that Robert Frost poem, two roads diverged. Choosing that less traveled financial road, the one focused on learning how money works and making it work for you that can genuinely change your whole life.
Definitely.
So our mission today is basically to give you the map for that road. We're pulling out the key ideas, the principles you can actually use without you having to wade through, hundreds of pages.
Let's do it. And maybe the best place to start is with one of the absolute bedrock principles.
Yeah.
The difference between assets and liabilities.
Okay, yeah. Forget the complicated accounting jargon for a sec.
Right. The rich dad simplified it for kids, and honestly, it's brilliant because it cuts through the noise.
He just said, an asset puts money in your pocket. Simple.
And a liability.
Takes money out of your pocket. That's it. End of story.
And, this simple distinction, it's the foundation for understanding everything else about your financial health. It connects directly to your income statement and your balance sheet.
Explain that connection a bit more. The income statement is...
That tracks what's coming in your income and what's going out your expenses
Hey.
over a period of time.
Okay. Cash flow, basically.
Right. And the balance sheet is a snapshot. It shows what you own your assets and what you owe your liabilities at one specific moment.
Got it.
The crucial insight, the place where so many people get tripped up, is understanding how the money flowing through your income statement affects your balance sheet. People earn more, but...
They just buy more stuff that takes money out of their pockets. Bigger houses, fancier cars, more liabilities.
Exactly. Which brings us to that big, often controversial point the book makes about your house. Is it really an asset?
Yeah, the rich dad really challenges that conventional wisdom.
He argues pretty strongly that for most people, their primary residence isn't an asset in the wealth-building sense. Think about it.
Okay.
You got the mortgage payments, right? Often for decades. Property taxes, those never seem to go down. Insurance, repairs, maintenance, it's a constant drain.
Money going out, out, out.
Right. The book even mentions his wife's parents paying like $1,000 a month in property taxes in retirement. That's tough.
Ouch, yeah. And houses don't always go up in value like we assume, do they?
Nope. There's an example of a friend's $1 million house that dropped big time. But maybe the biggest hit is the opportunity cost.
Meaning the money tied up in the house.
Could be working for you somewhere else. It could be invested in things that actually generate income, that put money in your pocket month after month. Instead, your cash flow is tied up just servicing the house.
Which leads straight into that typical middle-class cash flow pattern the book describes.
Yeah, it's a cycle. Income comes in from the job.
And immediately flows out. Living expenses, car payments, and the big one, the mortgage, maybe a little bit gets saved.
And who's really winning in that scenario?
Right.
Your employer gets your time and skills, the government gets its taxes, the bank gets the interest.
But your own wealth, it's often stuck in neutral.
Precisely. It's not building momentum.
Okay, so if that traditional path isn't the fast track, what is the goal, according to the rich dad? What does real wealth actually look like?
The book brings in this really powerful definition from Buckminster Fuller. Wealth isn't just about having a big pile of money.
No. What is it then?
It's about time. It's measured by how many days you could survive if you stopped working today.
Whoa. Okay, that shifts things. It's about sustainability, freedom.
Exactly. How long can your existing assets support you? That's your wealth. It's not just about being rich.
Ah, okay. So there's a difference between being rich and being wealthy.
Huge difference in the book's view. Being rich often just means having a high income. You might make a lot, but you're still dependent on that job, that salary. Stop working.
And the money stops flowing.
Right. Being wealthy, on the other hand, means the income generated by your assets is enough to cover all your expenses. You're financially independent.
Your money is working for you.
Exactly. You have choices. You don't need the job to survive. Kiyosaki shares his own story. He became a millionaire, I think it was 1989.
Yeah, something like that.
But he says he wasn't truly financially free until 1994, when his assets generated enough passive income to cover his lifestyle.
So the real goal isn't just a high salary, it's building those income-generating assets, passive income.
That's the name of the game.
Now, to help understand how people actually get their income, the book introduces a really useful framework, the Cashflow Quadrant. Let's unpack that.
Oh, this is brilliant. It's a simple model, but it explains so much about mindset and where your money comes from. It's got 4 sections: E, S, B, and I.
Okay. E is for?
Employee. This is the most common quadrant. People here trade their time for money, a salary, or a wage.
And their main driver is usually security, right? Benefits, a steady paycheck.
Exactly. Security is huge. Often there's an underlying fear of not having enough money.
Okay, then S?
S is for self-employed or small business owner. Think doctors, lawyers in solo practice, consultants, shop owners, freelancers.
The ones who want to be their own boss.
Right. They value independence. They often have that mindset of, if you want it done right, do it yourself. They're often highly skilled, but the downside is they are the business. If they stop working,
The income stops, like the employee, just maybe with more control, but also more risk sometimes.
correct. Now, the right side of the quadrant is where things get really interesting for wealth building. Let's start with B.
B for business owner. How's it that different from S, the self-employed person? This is key, isn't it?
Absolutely crucial distinction. The S is the system. The B owns the system.
Ah.
E quadrant folks focus on building systems and hiring talented people, often ES, SS, and even other Bs and Es, to run those systems. They delegate, they leverage.
Like Henry Ford, he didn't need to know how to build every part of the car himself.
Exactly. He knew how to build a system and hire people who did know. The mindset is about finding people smarter than you in specific areas and letting them run with it. The business makes money even if the owner isn't physically there working in it every day.
So it's about creating something that generates income somewhat independently of your direct effort. And the last quadrant, I.
I is for investor. This is where money itself becomes your employee.
Making money with money.
Precisely. You're deploying capital into assets, stocks, bonds, real estate businesses, with the expectation of generating more capital. This is what the book calls the playground of the wealthy. It's where money truly transforms into wealth.
And to really understand the power difference between the left side, E and S, and the right side, B and I, the book talks about OPT and OPM.
Yes. Crucial concepts. OPT is other people's time.
Using the time and effort of employees or teams.
Right. And OPM is other people's money.
Using borrowed funds or investor capital.
These are the leverage tools primarily used on the B&I side. On the left side, E's and S's, you are often the other people whose time and money are being utilized by those on the right side.
Wow. Okay, so building a business, B, means you leverage OPT. And smart investing often involves leveraging OPM.
That's the core idea. It's about amplifying your results far beyond what you could achieve solely with your own time and money.
This quadrant framework, it really gives you a kind of roadmap, doesn't it? It shows you where you are and where you might want to aim if wealth building is the goal. It's not just about earning more, but earning differently.
Exactly. Shifting from the left side to the right side.
Now, alongside this, the book hammers home the importance of developing what it calls financial intelligence or financial IQ. It's not just about earning, it's about being smart with money. What skills make up this financial IQ?
Rich Dad breaks it down into 4 key technical skills. First, accounting, or maybe better put, financial literacy.
Understanding the numbers.
Yeah, the ability to read and actually understand financial statements, your income statement, your balance sheet. Knowing what they mean lets you spot strengths, weaknesses, opportunities in a business or investment. It's like learning the language of money.
Okay, gotta speak the language. What's number 2?
Investing. This is the science and maybe the art of making money. It's about strategies, formulas, different ways to put your capital to work to generate returns. It requires creativity sometimes too.
So knowing how to make your money multiply efficiently. Got it.
Third, understanding markets, the science of supply and demand.
Okay.
This means recognizing economic trends, seeing how different factors affect prices. It also includes the technical side of markets, understanding how emotions like fear and greed drive decisions and create opportunities or risks.
So knowing the forces at play.
And the fourth pillar of financial IQ,
The law. Basically having an awareness of the rules of the game.
like taxes, corporate structures.
Oh.
Exactly. Understanding relevant corporate regulations, accounting standards, tax laws, especially as they relate to investing in business. Knowing this helps you, play within the rules, protect yourself, and maybe even use the rules to your advantage legally.
The book gives a pretty exciting example of how financial intelligence in investing can lead to rapid gains, but it stresses it's not just gambling. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, it talks about things like investing in pre-IPO stock, getting in early on a company before it goes public, maybe buying shares for pennies like 25 cents.
Okay.
Then, if the company is solid and the IPO is successful, that price could jump significantly, maybe $2, maybe even $20 or more, almost overnight.
Wow.
But the key point they make is that it's not just luck. It comes from understanding the business, doing your due diligence, using that financial literacy. It's calculated risk based on knowledge, not just a random bet.
That definitely highlights the potential speed on the eye side compared to just earning a salary. Now, shifting gears a bit, the book raises some pretty serious concerns about traditional retirement planning, especially how things have changed.
Oh, massively. It draws a really sharp contrast between the old days of defined benefit, retirement benefit plans, pensions basically, where the company promised you an income for life.
Yeah, my grandpa had one of those.
Right. And the modern reality, which is mostly defined contribution plans like the 401k plan,
Where the responsibility is all on you?
entirely on the employee to save enough, invest wisely, and hope it lasts. The book paints a potentially grim picture for a lot of people facing retirement, especially when you factor in rising healthcare costs and the fact that we're living longer.
And it backs us up with some pretty stark statistics about how financially unprepared many older folks are.
Absolutely. It cites data suggesting, a huge percentage of people over 65 just don't have enough savings to be truly independent. They end up relying heavily on Social Security or family. It shows the traditional work hard, save a bit model hasn't really worked out for the majority.
The rules just completely changed. The industrial age promise isn't the information age reality.
Exactly. The old deal was go to school, get good grades, land a secure job, stay loyal, and the company or government would largely take care of you in retirement.
The gold watch and the pension.
Pretty much the information age. Totally different. It demands continuous learning, adapting, probably changing jobs or even careers multiple times. Financial security depends almost entirely on your own savings and investments. Job security is, it's not what it used to be.
And technology accelerates everything. Moore's law information doubling every 18 months or whatever. You have to keep learning just to stay relevant.
Constantly upskilling. And the book gives great examples of this shift in action, right? Like how new players disrupted old giants.
Yeah, like Bill Gates and Microsoft basically blindsiding IBM because they understood the future of software and personal computing better.
For the AOL-Time Warner merger. The new media company swallowing the old one.
Right.
It also talks about how many young tech entrepreneurs became billionaires bypassing the traditional job route altogether. They saw the new opportunities.
And it even mentions how the internet creates global competition for jobs, potentially pushing down wages for some roles. It all points to needing to take control yourself.
It really does. That safety net of lifelong employment with one company, it's largely gone. Financial literacy and having multiple income streams are becoming less of a luxury and more of a necessity.
Now, connected to this need for constant learning, the book talks about how we learn and that not everyone learns the same way.
Yes, this is a great point. It's not just what you learn, but figuring out how you personally learn best. Lifelong learning is key, and that means understanding your own style.
Kiyosaki shares his own story, right? Struggling in traditional school.
Yeah, but thriving with hands-on experience, learning by doing. He mentions different types of intelligence, linguistic, logical, spatial, kinesthetic, etc. The idea is find what works for you. Maybe you learn by reading, maybe by listening, maybe by building something, maybe by teaching someone else.
It's a good reminder that book smarts aren't the only kind of smarts, especially for practical things like finance. And beyond just the smarts, the book really dives into mindset, especially the role of emotions like fear.
Huge emphasis on this. Emotional intelligence, like Daniel Goleman talks about, the book suggests feelings often have way more power over our decisions than pure reason does.
Like that Erasmus quote about feeling versus reason, 24-1 or something.
Something like that, yeah. So managing your emotions, particularly fear of losing money, fear of failure, fear of taking risks, is absolutely critical if you want to move towards financial independence.
And it contrasts the two dads' approaches to risk and debt again here, doesn't it?
Starkly. The poor dad mindset was very risk-averse. Don't be a lender or a borrower. Pay off your mortgage above all else. Play it safe.
Avoid debt like the plague.
Right. Whereas the rich dad understood that debt isn't inherently bad. It's a tool. The key is understanding how to use it.
Okay, so explain that difference. Good debt versus bad debt.
Basically, the poor and middle class often use debt, credit cards, car loans, even sometimes mortgages on oversized houses to buy liabilities, things that take money out of their pocket.
Consuming debt.
Exactly. The rich, or those learning to be rich, learn to use debt, strategically good debt, to acquire assets, things that put money in their pocket, like borrowing to buy a rental property that generates positive cash flow.
So the debt actually helps you make money.
That's the goal, using leverage wisely.
And leverage isn't just about debt, is it? The book mentions other forms.
Correct. We touched on it with the B&I quadrants: OPT, other people's time, and OPM, other people's money. Building a business leverages the time and skills of your team. Investing often leverages capital from banks or other investors.
The point being, if you're only working hard and saving your own money, you might actually be the leverage someone else is using.
Oof, yeah. That's a tough realization for some. Rich Dad's definition of leverage was powerful, doing more and more with less and less effort. The wealthy continuously add leverage to amplify their results.
Now, related to leverage is risk. The book isn't saying be reckless, but it advocates for smart risk-taking. The Wright brothers story is a good illustration.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. They didn't just strap on wings and jump off a cliff. They went to Kitty Hawk, a place with soft sand and steady winds, a controlled environment to experiment, to fail safely, and to learn from those failures.
They managed the risk intelligently.
Exactly. Contrast that with people who are so paralyzed by the fear of failure, maybe losing a little money, that they never even try to get off the ground financially. The book also hits on those self-limiting phrases people use.
Like, I can't afford it.
Right. Or, you can't do that, that's too risky. These often reflect the mindset trapped in current circumstances, rather than looking for ways to afford it or how to do it safely.
And the book makes another interesting point about risk related to how you earn money, specifically the tax situation for employees.
Yes. It argues that income earned in the employee quadrant, is often the most expensive kind of income.
Why expensive?
Because it's typically taxed at the highest rates. After income tax, Social Security, Medicare, state taxes, employees might only be working for, say, 50% or less of their gross pay. The government gets paid first.
And the tax breaks for employees are relatively limited.
Pretty much. The main one might be contributing to a 401k, which has its own potential drawbacks we can get into later. But overall, the tax system often favors business owners and investors.
Which leads to the advantages of the B quadrant.
Owning a business, yeah. Whether it's a small home-based business, buying a franchise, or even network marketing. The book mentions all of these angles. You generally have more opportunities to legally deduct expenses related to generating that income before you pay taxes.
So you pay taxes on what's left over, not on the gross amount like an employee.
In simple terms, yes. You earn, you spend on legitimate business expenses, and then you pay taxes on the profit. It can lead to a significantly lower effective tax rate. Again, the book stresses doing this legally and ethically, not tax evasion.
Right, important distinction. Now, to make all this less theoretical, the book is packed with real-world examples of Kiyosaki and his wife Kim putting these ideas into practice.
Absolutely. Real estate investing is a huge part of their story. They share details of buying rental properties, duplexes, small apartment buildings, houses in places like Oregon, Arizona, Oklahoma.
And they break down the numbers, right? Like purchase price, down payment, rental income.
All of it. Income, expenses like taxes, insurance, repairs, property management fees, and crucially, the resulting cash flow, the money left in their pocket each month, and the return on their actual invested capital. These examples show how it works step by step.
They even talk about other ventures like a shaved ice business, I think.
Yeah, and using creative financing like seller financing or pulling money from retirement accounts carefully to get deals done. There's even the story of renting out their own house for passive income while they traveled.
And it's not just their story. They include anecdotes from others, even their kids later on, applying the principles.
Right, showing it's a learnable process. And they contrast these active, often real estate-focused strategies with their own experiences, including some significant six-figure losses in the stock market early on.
Ouch. Why include the losses?
To reinforce the point about needing financial education before jumping into complex investments, and perhaps to subtly argue that direct control over assets like real estate can sometimes offer more predictability, or at least transparency, than stocks for some people, especially beginners.
It really drives home that rich dad philosophy.
Right.
Get educated, take control, focus on assets that generate cash flow, which ties into the type of education the book values.
Yeah, it's all about practical education, skills over theories.
Skills make you rich, not theories. That's a direct quote, isn't it?
It is. And the book loves pointing out famous entrepreneurs who didn't necessarily follow the traditional academic route.
Like Bill Gates, Michael Dell, Steve Jobs, even older examples like Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, people who learned by doing, by solving real-world problems.
Exactly. Kiyosaki shares his own approach of giving himself these 5-year learning periods for new fields, like when he first got into real estate, or later into stocks. He expected to make mistakes.
Viewing mistakes as tuition, basically, part of the learning cost.
Right. A very different mindset from the traditional school system where mistakes are penalized. In the real world of building wealth, mistakes often teach the most valuable lessons if you learn from them.
Another powerful concept the book brings in is the idea of networks, using Metcalfe's law. What's the connection to wealth?
Metcalfe's law basically states that the value of a network increases exponentially as the number of users or participants grows. Think about the internet or Facebook.
Okay, more connections, way more value.
Right. So applying this to business, it highlights the immense power of network-based business models compared to, say, the isolated John Wayne-style entrepreneur trying to do everything alone.
What kind of network businesses does it mention?
2 main types. First, traditional franchises like McDonald's or maybe mailboxes, etc., as an older example. Second, direct sales or network marketing, which it calls personal franchises. It notes the explosive growth of these models, despite criticism, because they harness the power of networks effectively.
It's that leverage idea again, but applied to people and connections. Interesting. The book also touches on something more personal self-awareness, knowing your strengths.
Yeah, this is important.
Yeah.
It stresses figuring out what you're naturally good at and leaning into those strengths, rather than trying to force yourself to be someone you're not, or just blindly copying someone else's path.
Kiyosaki talks about his own realization here, right?
He does. He realized his strength wasn't necessarily in being the expert at everything, but in learning from others, appreciating their skills, and bringing people together. Trying to suppress his own personality or force himself into a mold didn't work.
Be authentic, leverage your unique talents. That's key in any field, I suppose, including finance. Okay, as we move towards the end of the book's message, there's a real sense of urgency about financial literacy, especially looking at the broader financial system and the looming retirement issues.
Definitely. There's an anecdote about presenting to mortgage bankers and realizing that even these financial professionals might lack a deep understanding of personal wealth creation beyond their specific loan products.
They know their niche, but not the whole picture.
Potentially, yeah. And he contrasts this with a news story he saw about a couple retiring early solely based on stock market gains, using it to highlight the difference between relying on market appreciation, which is speculative, versus strategically using leverage, like debt on cash flowing real estate, to potentially build wealth faster and more predictably.
And the banker's reaction, hesitant to lend for stock investing.
Because it's seen as riskier, less collateralized than real estate. The point being, the average person often only uses their own money, and maybe their primary home equity, which is a much slower path than using leverage intelligently.
This all feeds into the discussion of the retirement crisis, which the book calls the beginning of the nightmare in one section. The Enron example is powerful here.
Oh, absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
Loyal employees doing everything right, saving diligently in their 401k, heavily invested in company stock, and then poof, company collapses, stock becomes worthless, retirement dreams shattered.
A brutal illustration of the risks of having all your eggs in one basket, especially when that basket is tied to your employer and the stock market's whims.
Yeah, the book uses this to question the lack of mandatory investor education. We have laws requiring seatbelts, but not basic financial education before people gamble their life savings in the market.
Good point. And Enron wasn't unique, was it?
Not at all. It was just the most high-profile example at the time. Millions of people lost huge chunks of their retirement savings in the dot-com bust and other market downturns.
The book even quotes Warren Buffett on diversification.
Saying something like diversification is protection against ignorance. It implies that if you really know what you're doing, you don't need to spread yourself so thin. Financial education reduces the need for blind diversification.
And Rich Dad had some pretty harsh words for the kind of financial education people often get from Wall Street itself.
Yeah, comparing it to the fox guarding the henhouse. Complex jargon. Advice that often benefits the advisor or the firm more than the client. Steering people into mutual funds they may not understand, charging fees.
It sounds quite critical.
It is. It also picks apart common retirement advice, like the systematic withdrawal strategy to sell off 4% or whatever each year.
What's wrong with that? Seems logical.
The risk is, what if the market doesn't cooperate? What if you hit a prolonged downturn right when you start withdrawing? The book uses the 1929 crash as an example. A withdrawal rate that seemed safe could deplete your savings much faster than expected if your principal is shrinking due to market losses.
Scary thought. And the stats cited from the early 2000s showed many people nearing retirement were already way behind.
Way behind. Huge percentages with very little saved. And for many, their actual retirement wealth had declined due to market losses. Why so little savings? The book points to high taxes, rising costs, maybe just not starting early enough or not understanding how long-term investing works.
It even throws shade on 401ks for high earners. Why?
The argument is that you defer taxes now, but you might end up paying taxes at a higher rate in retirement if tax rates go up, or if your retirement income pushes you into a higher bracket. Plus, withdrawals are taxed as ordinary income, whereas investments held outside of 401k might benefit from lower long-term capital gains tax rates. And there's potential double taxation income tax on withdrawal and estate tax if passed on.
Wow, okay. Lots to think about there. This leads to the idea of an illusion of safety in a coming financial storm.
Yeah, the big shift from defined benefit pensions, where the company bore the risk, to defined contribution 401ks, where the employee bears all the risk, is central. The company promises to contribute, not to guarantee an outcome.
And Rich Dad predicted a major crisis because of this shift.
He foresaw a huge retirement crisis potentially hitting around 2020 or later, simply because baby boomers and subsequent generations wouldn't have saved enough, especially with longer lifespans and potential strains on government resources like Social Security and Medicare.
The book also talks about market psychology, financial frenzy, and panic.
Right. Frenzy is when people irrationally pile into assets, converting cash to assets regardless of price, driven by greed, like the Dutch tulip mania centuries ago, or maybe the dot-com bubble.
Buying high because everyone else is.
Yeah. And panic is the reverse, irrationally dumping assets and converting back to cash, driven by fear and buyer's remorse. This is what triggers market crashes.
And things like Roth IRAs, introduced later.
Just another defined contribution plan, really.
Mm-hmm.
Good for some, especially middle-income earners who expect to be in a higher tax bracket later, since contributions are after tax, but withdrawals are tax-free. But fundamentally, it still puts the onus on the individual to save and invest successfully. It doesn't solve the underlying potential savings shortfall.
And there's another personal anecdote about stock market losses after the dot-com bust.
Yeah, someone losing a huge percentage of their portfolio, underscoring again the volatility and risk if you don't truly understand the market or your investments.
So after all these warnings and critiques, what's the final takeaway? How do you navigate this?
It all comes back to the core message. Stop working for money. Learn to make money work for you.
Take control. Get educated.
Proactively. Don't wait for the system to save you. Build your financial intelligence. Understand assets and liabilities. Focus on acquiring assets that generate passive income streams.
And consider moving towards the right side of the cash flow quadrant.
Explore business ownership, whether small or large. Learn about strategic investing, especially in assets like real estate where you might have more control and tax advantages. Don't just blindly follow the herd into paths that might lead to working for 50% of your income your whole life, only to face an uncertain retirement.
The book ends with this metaphor of building a financial ark, right?
Exactly. Build it in your mind first through education, and then in reality through acquiring assets. Prepare yourself for potential financial storms so you're not dependent on the whims of the market or your employer. Build your own security.
Okay, let's try to boil this down. We've covered a ton. You've got the core principles from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that fundamental difference in mindset.
Poor dad.
Yeah.
Security, job, save. Rich dad. Freedom, assets, leverage.
The absolute necessity of understanding assets versus liabilities. Assets put money in your pocket.
Liabilities, take it out. Know the difference.
The Cashflow Quadrant, ESB, understanding where your income comes from and where you want it to come from.
Moving from the left side to the right side, if financial independence is the goal.
The critical need for financial IQ, accounting, investing, markets, law. Being financially literate.
And understanding the changing rules of retirement and the potential pitfalls of traditional plans.
So, the final provocative thought for everyone listening. Are you primarily on the path of working for money day in, day out?
Or are you actively, consciously building assets that will eventually work for you even while you sleep? What kind of financial arc are you building right now?
Really take a minute to think about that. Where do you fall in the cash flow quadrant? Where do you want to be? Hopefully this deep dive gave you some powerful tools and maybe a new lens to look at your own financial situation.
Absolutely. And maybe next time we can dig into some more specific strategies, get into the real nuts and bolts of building those assets.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks for tuning in.
Every topic's got a taste, so like, share, and subscribe now. Your next plate's coming soon.